I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network.
PJ O'Rourke, world-renowned political commentator, humorist. PJ, how many books have you written?
I think it's 16 now.
Okay, but how many have you...
I got another one coming out. I can't remember if that ruins the count.
How many have you really written? Those are how many you've published.
Oh, how many have I read? Oh, considerably fewer than that.
No, I mean really written. Like, where's your sort of like your novels under some pen name or whatever?
No, it's just what you see on Amazon is what you get.
And your next book is Thrown Under the Omnibus, is coming out, is a collection of the best, right?
Yeah, I think that'll be out. I think official publication date is in November, which means it's out in October, or for all I know, is out now.
Yeah, on some weird internet space where they collect all your stuff.
It's like the February issue of Vanity Fair, which arrives in your home in late November.
Einstein was really correct when it comes to publishing. Time is all completely relative.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like magazines come out 2 months in advance, but if you want to get in the November issue, you have to submit by May. And it's the same thing with book publishing.
The previous year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lead time's about 18 months, and for some reason the thing publishes 3 months ahead of time.
PJ, everyone calls you kind of a political pundit, but I don't really believe that. I think at heart you're a comedian and a humorist, and your interest is politics. Just like Jim Gaffigan's interest is food, your interest is politics. And
right, and every female comedian on the face of the earth's interest is weight and body weight, body mass index, and how horrible men are in bed.
I wasn't going to quote from it, but you did write the article on the TV show Girls, which was excellent. So it seems like you have been studying the subject of female comedians, in particular.
I have 2 teenage daughters who are fans of this sort of thing, and therefore I make preemptive. I do some preemptive viewing.
But So I have 2 teenage daughters as well, and you mentioned in that
us, and I mean that both metaphorically and literally.
No, it was the saddest thing actually when I saw
their personalities kind of change, moving further away from me, was very sad.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of it kind of depends. I mean, sometimes their personalities can also change in a way that you'd wish they'd moved away.
That's true too. So
I have a friend whose daughter, oh boy, his wife and his daughter were just at it constantly. I guess she was about 15 or something at the time. And the two of them were just at loggerheads every minute of the day. And he's a gutsier guy than I am. He came downstairs one morning and he said, one of you is leaving. You can decide between yourselves who it's going to be and where you're going to go, but one of you is leaving this house.
Yeah, I know the feeling, and it's just...
And so the girl went off to prep school, and she came back all much better behaved, and now everything is good.
I've been actually trying to homeschool my kids just because I don't really believe in the public school education, but it's weird. It's weird how they're rebelling against me. Like, they'll tell me they hate school, and I say, fine, just don't go anymore. You're allowed to stay home. And then immediately they start doing their homework. Like, that's how they rebel.
I hate, well, the message there is I hate school, but I hate you more.
Right, exactly. Yeah, thank you. I never really thought of it that way. Yeah, see, you're a genius. Everyone who says that is right. So this is what I want to first ask you, though, which is, it seems like a lot of the times you have opinions on everything, but a lot of the times you talk about politics and the issues you care about, like libertarianism and so on, but it seems like with politics, there's three choices. People either get angry, and you see that all over the internet, particularly the comments to your articles, or people ignore it, or people make fun of it. And you take, it's like Jon Stewart, John Oliver, like you sort of take that third route of kind of translating a very high-stakes political situation and finding the humor in it. And
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You really don't have a choice. I mean, to take it seriously is to indicate you're an idiot.
Explain that, actually. Like, because some people do think...
Well, the thing of it is that we all know how the political system works because we've all seen micro examples. I mean, if we think this over, we all know how politics works from micro examples of politics. We all are, we all have jobs. We all are on committees. We've all been involved in public things, whether it's, the zoning board, the church, some charity, a club we belong to. We know that that politics is, that is to say, everybody voting on everything, is probably about the worst way to achieve anything in the world, except as Winston Churchill pointed out, except for all the other ways. I mean, if you're on a committee, say you're on your country club's golf committee, you either go to that committee meeting and suck it up, and you know how boring it's going to be, and you know who the morons on the committee are, but you either go to that committee and suck it up, or you let the bossy person take over, and the next thing you know, like the red tees are 500 yards down the fairway. Nobody's mowing the rough. Somebody moved the hole off the green. I mean, so there are times when you have to have politics, and living in a nation is one of those times. So you have to have politics, but you can't take it too seriously. And the other thing is, we all know what kind of person is most attracted to the practice of politics. Is it the person? In fact, I just wrote a column telling Dr. Ben Carson, to stop running for president. You're a neurosurgeon. We need you.
That's a good point.
I mean, you were the first person to separate Siamese twins co-joined at the head. I mean, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton might get co-joined at the head. Who knows? We need you there.
So here's a question though. Can humor, if you're at that country club meeting and you're not the boss of the meeting, do you feel humor is the most powerful way to potentially provoke change, kind of in a Jon Stewart sort of way?
I don't think humor, unfortunately, or the world would be a better place. I don't think humor. I mean, for one thing, Hitler would have been laughed off the map, years before he came to power. Here's this goofy guy running around, with too much starch in the right sleeve of his shirt, and the snot brush mustache, and telling everybody that the Jews control everything. If they did, it would be better organized. Damn it!
Yeah. Too bad there was no Jon Stewart in Germany in the 30s.
Yeah, but anyway, so humor doesn't work. What it does is keeps you from going nuts. So, it works on a mental health level. Is it efficacious in terms of policy, foreign, domestic, or otherwise? No, it's not. Or Will Rogers would have been the president.
Or let me ask you, like George Carlin was in some sense politically motivated, and yet he also has said he never cared about politics at all. He would always stand to the side, even though a lot of his comedy was sort of politically motivated. He thought the best
there were a lot
thing.
of political implications in his comedy, but he didn't get political with a capital P. And even Jon Stewart, who is more political than Carlin. I mean, Stewart's a pretty committed liberal, but nonetheless, he manages to stand aside most of the time. I should say managed. He's gone from his job now, but even the more politically committed comics, Dennis Miller would be another example, one a little bit closer to my side of things. And but most of the time he manages to stand aside, and neither one of them ever let anything get in the way of a good joke. No matter how much they may adore Rand Paul in one case or Hillary Clinton in the other, they never ever miss a chance to get a joke.
Right, and I feel you do the same. Like, you have managed to stand aside in a clever way by not being a Democrat or Republican, but by being a libertarian, which nobody really understands at heart.
Including all us libertarians.
Right.
Although, in point of fact, I actually am a Republican. I just happen to be sort of a loosey-goosey Republican, not a rhino, not a liberal Republican, not a Rockefeller Republican. I'm just a Republican who doesn't give a damn about all those social issues that are supposed to be so important to the Republican Party. I mean,
but I don't think you also let that stand in the way of a good joke. Like, I think I've probably read.
Of course not. No. I for instance, I'm old friends with John McCain, and I couldn't admire the guy more. I've known him for 20 years, 25. And that wouldn't keep me from making a joke at his expense. It's my job.
I want to reel back a little. I have some political questions, and of course, we're starting to get into a big political year. Although I still think it's a little early to talk too much about it. But I want to reel back.
Yeah, it's a little hard to know what the throwdown's going to be.
Right.
I was saying to somebody else, somebody that at this stage in the 2008 presidential election cycle, Barack Obama. He was about as likely to get elected president as some, small-time community organizer from the wrong side of Chicago, a junior senator from the world's most corrupt state, at least on this continent, Illinois, with this name, Barack Hussein Obama, that sounded like somebody who tried to sabotage an airplane with an underpants bomb.
Right, and yet
how is that guy going to be president?
That's really the beauty of a presidential election, is that it's like a thriller story. It's like the reality is stranger than fiction.
Oh, yeah. You don't know how it's going to turn out.
So what I want to do, though, is I want to reel back. And like I said, I personally view you as more a comedian and humorist. And your writing has been a huge influence on mine. Just the way you call it like it is. You don't have what appears to be a huge bias. Like, you step to the side quite often. Like, you don't let a good joke, or you don't let reality get in the way of a good joke, or whatever. So how did it start for you? Like, did you decide to yourself, boy, I want to be like George Carlin, or did you say, I want to make commentary on George McGovern?
Not at all. Not at all. I was an English major. I was an aspiring novelist and poet. When I started to do journalism, which I did in order to feed myself, because aspiring novelist and poet is a pretty good synonym for hungry and broke and wearing rags. When I started journalism, I started very much on the serious side of stuff. I was features editor for a weekly, very sort of serious little weekly newspaper, and even when I wrote for the underground press, although we did do some funny stuff, most of the time we were terribly in earnest. It occurred to me only slowly where my talent lay, and it was actually a comedian that I knew years ago put this in very good terms. He said, somebody asked him, "Why are you a comedian?" And he said, "Look, people call you a horse's ass enough times. Saddle up and ride out of town."
That's great.
And that's pretty much what happened to me. Where it comes from is no great mystery. I'm Irish. I come from a big Irish family. Not a Kennedy kind of Irish family, but not a lace curtain Irish family, but a hard harp kind of Irish family. I mean, I'm not saying that there were Whitey Bulgers in my family, but that was not for lack of my Uncle Mikey Mike trying. This didn't have to be as smart as Whitey. So anyway, I come from a big rough Irish family. Now, there are two kinds of big Irish families. There is the teasing kind, and there is the hitting kind. And I had the good fortune to come from a teasing family. Teasing is how they communicated with each other. It's how they said, "I love you." It's how they said, "F off." It's how they said everything.
So at this point, you're doing journalism. Were editors saying, "Hey, cut down on the jokes, take your personality out of it"? Like, how were they? Where was the dissonance happening?
No. I would say it was the contrary. I would say it was, give us some more stuff like you did on so-and-so, I mean, I would do a funny piece, and I would be encouraged, either by editors or readers or whatever, so.
But then it seems like you made the actual leap, and you owned it, and you went over to the National Lampoon.
Well, it was kind of accidental. I liked the National Lampoon ever since it had come out. Ever since I'd first seen an issue of the National Lampoon, which was fairly within a couple months of its founding, I had really liked it, and I'd even written a letter to the editor. Like a business, like a pitch letter, saying, "Gee, I like your publication. I'd like to write for it." And I'd sent some clippings, and I'd gotten a little encouragement back. And then I had a friend who was friends with a friend, the way these things usually work. And so my friend and I ended up pitching a couple stories to Doug Kenny, one of the founding editors at National Lampoon. And, Doug was moderately encouraging. He said, "Yeah, we'll give him a try," And so we did a few pieces on spec for the National Lampoon. They bought a couple of them. And that was that. It just sort of developed from there. It was just like one more freelance outlet for me at first, and then they started buying more of my stuff, and they were paying more than other people were, and so on.
And then, what would you consider as like the modern equivalent of the National Lampoon? Like, do you read The Onion or anything like that?
I don't read it a lot. I mean, you'll find that humorists are only moderate fans of other people's humor, and part of that's for fear of stealing a joke. Sometimes you have a joke and that joke is not yours, but you don't know whose it is. You don't even know how to attribute the joke, There's a joke of which I'm very fond. I think it belongs to Jay Leno, which in turn means that it probably belongs to Jay Leno's writers, but it was like about the trash compactor. It turns 10 pounds of trash into 10 pounds of trash.
That is good.
So it's a brilliant joke, but I'd love to steal it, and probably have stolen it. But anyway, so when I do see the Onion, I always like it. I think yes, I would say the Onion would be the modern equivalent. There are probably some various equivalents on the internet that I don't know about.
So let me ask you, like, is there a process in the sense that politics and obviously a presidential election there are very high stakes events in the United States. Whether or not they are actually high stakes doesn't matter. People believe they are high stakes. And so
yeah, they certainly looked that way at the time. It's like Super Bowl game, you know?
Yeah. And
I mean,
so,
10 years hence, you know, the great majority of people could care less who won, but...
Do you have any process by which you take like a political situation, like let's say the Republican debate a few days ago, and pull the humor out of it?
No, I do not. I just, you know, I look at this as a job. And sometimes, like, I have an idea for the job. Sometimes something will strike me funny. And sometimes an editor will have an idea. I pride myself on being like a good lawyer. Is that I can take any case, and you know, and like a lawyer, if the facts are on my side, I'll pound the facts. If the law's on my side, I'll pound the law. If nothing's on my side, I'll pound the table.
That's funny.
You know, and like there was a writer famous in his day, pretty much forgotten now, named Lord Dunsany, and he was a kind of belonged to. Most of his writing, not all of it, but most of his writing fell into the J.R.R. Tolkien sort of trolls and elves. Like, you know, Tolkien used to have a little group called the Inklings that met once a week, and they were all writers, and hence the name. And they would read their works in progress. And he begins to read, and one of the other Inklings says, "Not another fucking elf." And apparently it was like 2 years before Tolkien would read in public again.
That's funny. So I did not know that about him, and I'm a fan.
Yeah, so, Dunsany's stuff, but Dunsany prided himself on his ability. He was a freelance, totally freelancer, and he prided himself on the ability to write, and he made a bet at his club. He said, "You name a subject, I will write a story and I will sell it." And the person who bet him said the mud of the Thames. And indeed, Lord Dunsany wrote a short story where the mud of the Thames was the villain and sold it. Actually, I thought that was too easy. Mud of the Thames, like anybody could, you know. I think any good horror supernatural writer could do with that, having seen the mud of the Thames.
But you seem very similar to that in that, you know, particularly like I you know, if someone goes down your Daily Beast columns where you write regular articles, it's everything from Joe Biden to Lena Dunham to Brian Williams to, I don't know, Taco Bell or whatever. Like you write about everything in there.
Yeah, I'll write about anything. Yeah, I don't care.
But
There's something funny about everything, almost everything.
There is a little bit more influence from the political side. And what I'm curious about, though, is obviously commenters on the internet go crazy. And, you know, the entire internet is essentially filled with what I call outrage porn. Like people basically, it's almost like they fulfill their pornography needs with like outrage on the internet. And
yeah, which is so silly when RedTube is available for free.
There you go. So, you know,
Google it tonight when nobody's looking.
Yeah, now I'm gonna have to like check it out when my wife's asleep. You know, I try not to pay attention to any of that. I'm assuming you don't really pay any attention to that.
I don't even know how.
But and yet though, like take the Brian Williams story. So an NBC anchor exaggerates his war adventures or non-adventures, however you have it, and that becomes a meme, as they say, on the internet. Everybody starts talking about it on the internet when in previously that would have been forgotten like 2 weeks later, and now the guy's career is ruined. So
yeah, I know it's like it's a little much. The internet has allowed us to find out what everybody is thinking, and oh gosh, we wish we didn't know. You know, I mean, it was one of those things where you really feel like Bluebeard's wife. Do not open that door. Do not open that door.
And yet we all do.
Have you ever had the experience of being of watching a horror movie? Not with a bunch of middle-class white people, but with people from other cultures, black, Latino, whatever, who are not inhibited about talking to the screen?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so you go to a horror movie with that kind of audience, or a large element of that kind of audience, and it's great because they're going, "Don't open that door!" I think Chris Rock's got a whole routine about that. He's about white people in horror movies. He said, if they hear a horrible noise in the basement, the first thing they do is grab a flashlight and head for the stairs. He said, "I am so out of that house." Hey, honey, what is that rattling chains in the attic?
Do you feel like you follow comedians like Jay Leno and Chris Rock more than you follow, I don't know, what Joe Biden is saying? Or do you feel like it's your job to follow what Joe Biden's saying?
Oh, no. I spend much more time dealing with what Joe Biden says, but I have a lot more respect. I have a lot more respect for Jay Leno and Chris Rock.
And why is that?
Because their job is harder. Who was that? It was a Jewish comedian. I can't remember who was dying. It was like Sid Caesar or something. He said, dying is easy. Comedy is hard.
Comedy is hard. So like, again, I'm curious. Like,
how hard can politics be? This is one of the things that keeps me from taking it too seriously. Is how hard can it be? Kim Jong-un is in politics.
Right.
He's a major player.
Well, just look at the Republican or Democrat debates, over the past, let's say, 20 years. Like, what candidates?
Just list the candidates. List the candidates for president in 2016. List them all. What? That's a list of candidates for like the most powerful person in the entire world? No. You read that list, it's like the world's worst law firm. This is a law firm that couldn't get Caitlyn Jenner, off for identity theft from Bruce.
Well. Also, if you list the names, you're not going to have any Jews on the list. So there goes your law firm right out the door.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's not going to be a good. What was it? Somebody had. That's a panelist thing that we do at. Wait, don't tell me. So whoever the three panelists are, we always try to decide what kind of company that would be. If it's like if it's three Irish, it's a bar, obviously. If it's like two Irish and a German name or something, it's either an insurance company or a real estate or a funeral home. If we've got a Jewish name in there, it's a law firm.
Or could be dentist firm or an accounting firm. Just throwing that in there.
Yeah, it could be, but that would be more Jewish.
Right.
If you got one Jewish, if you got like say if you got Poundstone, O'Rourke, and Sagal, it's a law firm.
Right. So it seems like you have like a base.
Poundstone, Felber, and Sagal.
that could be a law firm or an accounting firm. That could be an accounting firm.
That's accounting. That's accounting. Could be a dental practice.
So it seems like though there is a little bit of process in that you do have a base view of the world. Like there are things you feel strongly about, which is kind of the quest for freedom, and also if you're going to go for freedom, you also have to be able to handle the consequences. Which is I'm misquoting you, but that's a quote you made something like 22 years ago. But
actually, there are a lot of things I'm serious about. I'm serious about my family. I'm actually religious, as a matter of fact. I'm serious about my libertarian conservatism, classical liberalism, as we political science wonks like to call it. So lots of stuff I'm serious about.
You use that as a base for your comedy because, for instance, you've written about what you call punditese, so the language of political pundits, and using the prism of your political beliefs, you're able to make these funny translations between what a pundit says and what they're really saying.
That's right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do before the next Republican debate, I'm going to do for the Daily Beast, I'm going to do a glossary. I'm trying to collect all the pundit phrases.
That's a good idea, which is similar to an article you've written.
It is. That set me off. I realized that, that I had done that actually. I had done little bits of it in a couple of pieces I'd written about the candidates, translating. In fact, I just did some more of it, translating some punditese about Ben Carson. I just it'll be up this weekend. I just finished a piece for the. In fact, I was proofreading it as the phone rang, as you rang on the phone. Proofreading a piece about Ben Carson for this weekend's not Weekly Standard, the Daily Beast.
So why does a guy who's legitimately smart like Ben Carson, why does he want to be president?
Well, I think Ben thinks, as so many of us do, that, I mean, he thinks, boy, things are so screwed up, even I could make it better. This isn't my field. I went to medical school. I didn't go to medical school, I was an English major. But Ben Carson is thinking, this isn't my field. I went to medical school. I'm a surgeon, not a politician. But this is so messed up that even I could make this better. And he's right, but he's not going to get elected.
Do you want to make a prediction on who will be elected?
I think if you had to, at the moment, if you had to put money on it at the moment, which fortunately I don't, and I certainly don't recommend anybody else does so, I would go with the original front runners out of the gate, who may be lagging a little now in midfield, but they, among other things, they've got the money to stay in it for the distance.
You'd like Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, I mean, if you had to put money on it at this moment, that would be the safest bet.
Now, what about like Nate? You've probably seen Nate Silver's analysis where if you just look at blue states versus red states and the electoral votes, the clear blue states versus the clear red states, it's like 220 electoral votes to 100 electoral votes. No matter who the candidate is on either side, the Democrats have that advantage. What do you think of that type of analysis?
I think it probably applies more to congressional races, particularly statewide senatorial races, than it applies to presidential races, because presidential races come down to a fight between two personalities, and people, the public is fickle, and as I think it was Max Beerbaum pointed out, the public is so fickle they will sometimes even side with truth.
That's funny. So you do all these. You've been doing all these books ever since basically you broke out with Parliament of Whores. I don't know when that was, like 25 years ago or
yeah, it was just about spot on 25. Yeah, it was like 24 years ago. It was 1991.
And what keeps you going? I mean, now 16, 17 books later, why do you keep writing all these books? I know obviously because it's fun and you have things to say and it's great, but do you ever?
Well, that's pretty simple. 3 minor children, all 3 of which have yet to be sent to college, and 2 of which are in private school, and a large mortgage. And need we go further?
No, I guess those are all good reasons, and they're all great books.
Yeah. But the other thing is that, if I didn't have to do this, would I do it anyway? Yeah, I would. I probably wouldn't travel as much as I do. I do get tired of doing that.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask you about that. So we were scheduling this podcast, and it seems like you've been to like 52 of the 50 states in the past 4 days. Like, why?
Yeah, it seems like that to me too, judging by my airplane seat sciatica. Yeah. I had to go. Actually, yeah, you're right. It was 52 because I had to go out to Vancouver. So I was doing I had a New Hampshire to Boston to Vancouver to Long Beach, California, back to New Hampshire, out to Minneapolis, back to here, while we were trying to schedule this podcast.
Yeah, like I feel like I physically can't do that. Like, why do you do that?
Well, to make a living. I do enjoy it. If I could teleport myself to all these places, I would enjoy it immensely. The travel does get wearing, and I am not too bad right now, but by the travel season is fall and spring. You get a break over Christmas and you get a break over the summer months. And this summer I was in heaven. I basically didn't. We've got a farm up in New Hampshire, and I basically didn't want that farm. We've got a bunch of property on which some things accidentally grow. But anyway, I was here all summer, and I had some good kids working for me, and I got stuff done that had been on my to-do list for a decade, and it was fabulous. And so I'm still in the stage of not minding the travel so much. Talk to me about the middle of December, and you'll get another story.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this then. You talk a lot about freedom. To you, I think to everybody that means something different. So to you, what does that mean?
Well, I think, I've got a pretty political science-like attitude about this. I mean, you're talking about first and foremost property rights. I mean, nothing comes before property rights. And of course, the first and most important property right is our right to our property of ourselves. That is what is so vile about slavery. Slavery oppresses people, yes, and slavery exploits people, but lots of things do that and don't have the onus, aren't as contemptible as slavery. What slavery does is deny our own property in ourselves, and that is evil. And so my first and foremost freedom is property rights, from which all other freedoms proceed.
And then what are those other freedoms? Because I feel like we're here, I feel almost like this is like a pyramid where you have kind of the body at the top, the most important, but then there's layers and layers and layers.
Well, yes and no. I mean, basically all the rest of the freedoms that proceed from firm property rights, which would be, first and foremost self-governance and rule of law. But those things, the rule of law is dependent, a rule of law is a corollary of property rights. But all the rest of the freedoms that we enjoy are fundamentally nobody's business. In other words, we're free. If we're free, we are free to do anything we like, so far as long as it does not do provable harm to other people.
And where do you think the U.S. government, not necessarily this administration, but just over the century or centuries, where do you think they've, in what ways have they crossed the line to restrict freedoms?
I mean, pretty much every way you can imagine. For instance, up in my hayfield, I don't have a pond. The reason I don't have a pond is I would have to have state for certain and probably federal wetlands permission to dig that pond. And I would, and if I decided to either let the pond fill up with cattails, which it very nearly did, one of our big projects this summer was to get all the cattails out of the pond that I don't have. You see, I don't have a pond, I have drainage improvement. I'm allowed to do drainage improvement. I'm not allowed to have a pond without a whole permitting process, and if the pond were to either go away of its own free will with the cattails, or if I were to decide that pond's not such a good idea because I don't want the kids and dogs falling in it, I would have to go through the whole permitting process to get rid of the pond.
So wait, can you use your drainage privileges to kind of make a pond, like drain the dirt out of the ground?
It's not a pond. It's drainage improvement. It is a low spot in the field. It is filled with water. It has a lot of frogs in it. You can wade in it. You could swim in it if you like. It's a little on the shallow side for that. But it is not a pond because I would need a state permit for a pond. It is drainage improvement.
So it does seem like there are many cases like that, like where just arbitrarily some bureaucrat decided, okay, here's a law which is going to get in the way of people's liberties.
Well, it's worse than that. Our legislators and our legislatures can do this all the time. They pass laws seemingly randomly, however, we can get rid of those people. We can vote against them. We can recall them. They are accountable to us. The problem with bureaucratic regulators is, who are they accountable to?
When you and your friends are kind of just sitting around the card table, coming up with suggestions off the top of your head, what would you do differently? Let's say if you were president.
Well, I think I would do, and although I got to say Reagan tried this without much success, I would do everything I could to narrow the scope of government. my problem with government is first and foremost quantitative. I mean, let's stipulate that what they're doing, that all the things that they're doing are good or at least well intended. They can't. An entity like the government simply can't do all the things that we're trying to make it do.
Well, but maybe that's true. So where's the line? Like let's take the 2008 banking crisis as an example, where everybody had an opinion one way or the other about every aspect of regulations, the bailouts, and so on. Is there a role for government in kind of regulating the extremes in either direction of capitalism?
Probably not. There is certainly a huge role for government in capitalism. The government is there to protect property rights and to enforce contracts. And capitalism is based upon property rights and contracts. If the government, as governments all over the world don't because of corruption or incompetence or a combination of the two, if the government fails to protect property rights and fails to enforce contract, you cannot have a successfully functioning capitalist system. Now, can the government do anything about bubbles? Bubbles and their consequent slumps that come after the bubbles. Well, the track record on that is simply not good. I mean, the government could hardly have been more interventionist in the 1930s than it was. And yet there was a depression of comparable, possibly even worse severity, wiped out my granddad, actually. There was a worse depression after World War II. However, it was way brief. I mean, it lasted less than 18 months and is now about nearly forgotten. By 1922, it was over. It was brilliant by 1921. It was 1919, 1921. And there was also a panic, bank run, and terrible economic chaos in 1907. But it was over very quickly. And in neither of these cases did the government do anything. In fact, the government probably wasn't in those days, especially in 1907, even equipped to do anything. The Fed didn't have the kind of powers that it has now. And so these things, we don't even remember them. I mean, who goes around talking about the Great Panic of 1907, or the Depression of after World War I? Most people don't even know they existed, and yet the Great Depression, is a huge thing in our memories. And now, Milton Friedman argued that it went on so long as it did because the government intervened. But it certainly went on for an awful long time, and whether that was because or either it was because of government intervention or because government intervention doesn't work, I'm not knowledgeable enough to say, but it's clear.
So there's kind of like let people do what they will, and also let the consequences happen. So, for instance, if the banks are going to fail, the banks are going to fail. Capitalism.
That's right. Yeah. Goodbye, Bear Stearns.
Right. So, and I guess the similar would hold to, let's say, murder. Crimes that are, like you say, are harming people. We need some enforcement to stop them from harming people.
Oh yeah, no, crime is entirely different matter than asset overvaluation.
But I would say politicians then kind of misinterpret, is this doing harm? And they get further and further out onto the spectrum until it's so unclear they can make an argument either way, and that's where politics goes bad.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. They think that their purpose, the purpose of government, which, is what their job's government, and the purpose of government is to prevent bad things from happening, which is why murder is against the law. Well, that's all well and good, but imagine a government, and we don't have to imagine it because we we had one fairly recently. In Western societies, we've had this kind of government, a government that thought its purpose was to prevent sin. Now, none of us are in favor of sin, at least not, in the abstract. At any given moment, we might be. But now, take the Ten Commandments. It's pretty much your Western civilization definition of the major sins. How many of those commandments could actually be made into law? Honor thy father and thy mother. Well, it would all be in, my kids would be so in jail.
I would be in jail for life.
I'd be in jail, yeah. We'd all be in jail. And if you go through, thou shalt not covet.
Jail.
Well, the law, how are you going to pass a law against that?
Maximum
Even
security.
Something as straightforward as thou shalt not make graven images. Well, what constitutes a graven image? Image of what? I mean, is a picture of a cute cocker spaniel bounding about in a field of lilies, a photograph on a greeting card. Is that a graven image? Only if you worship cocker spaniels, I guess. I don't know.
Which could be possible, but
actually, we just got one.
Really, you just got a cocker spaniel?
Yeah. I just got a cocker spaniel. I got the cutest little cocker spaniel puppy, English cocker spaniel. They're a little bigger than Americans.
Wait, you have 2 kids and you got a pet? Like you're
No, I've got 3 kids and I've got 4 dogs.
Okay, and I'm going to out you here. You're 67 years old, right?
That's right. We're turning 68 in November.
Oh my God, PJ, why are you? And then you travel all over the place. I feel like you're working too hard. I'm going to be your doctor here.
Well, given what doctor bills are like these days, I have yet to have a doctor tell me I was working too hard.
That's funny.
Maybe coincidence.
Well,
maybe now that I'm on Medicare, maybe doctors will start telling me I'm working too hard.
Was that a weird thing? Was that a weird thing when suddenly, like, you were old enough to be considered a senior citizen?
Yeah, I mean, what's even weirder was, like, last week I had to talk to my accountant. I had to decide whether to start taking Social Security or not.
Oh my gosh! And you write about this because all the baby boomers, and your last book, not the one coming up, but your last one was about the baby boomer generation.
That's right.
76 million people started retiring. I think around 2005, 2006, and
they did.
This is happening now. You're all old.
Right, I'm part of the problem. Yeah, and what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you're faced with a government that wants to give you these benefits? Do you say no? I'm too noble to take them.
What did you do?
I'm not too well. I put off taking the Social Security till I'm 70 because I'll get more money that way.
I see. Okay.
But Medicare, you can't even get out of it if you want to. I could go down there and say I refuse to do this.
Now, your next book, Thrown Under the Omnibus. How far back does this collection go? So this is a collection of your best and
this
stuff.
Is excerpts from all of my prior books. So it would go back to 1983, which would be the first book I published, which means in fact, since some of the stuff in my first 3 books or so was published, back in the 70s, some of this stuff goes back 45 years.
So obviously, like, you picked out what you considered your funniest or most amusing or interesting excerpts. Who would you say are the influences throughout these decades? Like, who's your favorite comedian or comedians?
Well, it wouldn't be favorite comedian because I'm much more somebody who reads than somebody who watches stuff. So it'd be the people that would have influenced me most would be like Jonathan Swift was a huge influence. The New Yorker humorist from the 1930s, S.J. Perlman, was certainly a big influence.
Really?
Thurber was a big influence.
What about Hunter S. Thompson, who is admittedly on the other end politically, but you both have that
Hunter
style.
and I were good friends.
Because you have a similar style in the sense that you'll go into a situation.
Yeah, so people always told us. I think that, funnily enough, Tom Wolfe was a bigger influence on me than Hunter Thompson. Although I mean, no one could. I mean, Hunter was so good, nobody could escape being influenced by him, and I certainly wouldn't claim to have escaped. But I actually came to Hunter Thompson relatively late. I didn't know about Hunter Thompson until, I don't think I ever read anything by Hunter Thompson until the early 70s.
Because Fear and Loathing on the campaign trail in 72 and your Parliament of Horrors are like two sides of the same card.
I know. And, I'm not sure I read Fear and Loathing on the campaign trail until after I wrote Parliament of Horrors.
That's fascinating because
that can't be quite right because I knew Hunter too well by then. I must have read it ahead of time. But it wasn't a... I think what happened was that Hunter and I have similar influences. Rather than being directly influenced by Hunter. I mean, the breakout guy for me, the guy who I looked at this and I said, gee, journalism could be something very different from what journalism traditionally has been, was Tom Wolfe. That was just, he's the guy who changed my mind about up till then. I didn't place much value on journalism. And he was the guy who changed my mind about that.
Well, I guess he is the first, even before Hunter really got very well known, he's the first who kind of makes himself a character in the story.
Well, not the first. I mean, you'll find A.J. Liebling doing that. I mean, Tom has his roots as well. And it was by no means unusual for journalists of a prior age to put themselves front and center in what they wrote. It kind of went out of fashion. Between Ernie Pyle and Tom Wolfe. So actually, the idea of sort of the voice of God, New York Times, AP, UPI, voice of God style of journalism was a relatively recent invention. It dates only from probably about the 1930s, and it doesn't really come into its own until the 40s, 50s, and it has about a 25 or 30 year run, and then we go back to much more of a first person. After all, Daniel Defoe was a journalist,
and particularly now
he wasn't shy.
Particularly now with the internet style of journalism, there's a lot of more kind of first-person point of view.
Well, now we've gone too far.
Maybe. We'll see.
I think any of us who are involved in new journalism, the first Tom, I know this from Tom because I know Tom, everybody from the very first generation of new journalists like Tom Wolfe down to the later day, their later day acolytes like myself, the sort of new journalism part two, we all wish that we perhaps had not unleashed this on the.
Although it's happened, but now I
Yeah.
do take one thing you said though. You said you're not that visual, and yet coming out of the National Lampoon, you have John Hughes, Harold Ramis. You have all these amazing guys who went on to be either movie stars or writers or directors. Like it seems like you have been influenced by some of these great comic movie writers.
Well, yes and no. I mean, not me personally very much. I don't watch a lot of movies, and it's not something that interests me terribly. Do I have visual sense? Yes, but it has much more. I mean, cartoonists would be something that I would pay much more attention to than I would pay to movies. But there definitely was a lot of movie making talent at the National Lampoon. There were sort of two sides to Lampoon. Some of the people embodied both. There was a literary side to the Lampoon, and there was a kind of theatrical side. The guys who started the Lampoon had been involved both in the Harvard Lampoon and also in the Hasty Pudding shows at the Lampoon. And Doug Kenny, for instance, was much more drawn to the theatrical side, and we can thank him for Animal House, whereas Henry Beard was strictly a print guy.
And then, of course, was John Hughes actually at the Lampoon?
He worked for me.
Yeah, so Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
This is before then. Hughes was a freelance writer for the National Lampoon and a prolific freelance writer for the National Lampoon. He and I worked together on the National Lampoon Sunday newspaper parody. And not long after that came out, or actually about the time that came out, I became editor-in-chief of the National Lampoon, and my first act was to call John, who was an advertising executive in Chicago. I called John and I said, John, I can pay you less.
and he took the offer.
He did it. He took the offer, yeah.
Could
he was
you,
the vice president, Leo Burnett.
Could you tell right away what an amazing talent he was?
Oh, fuck yes. Yeah.
What
Absolutely.
What stood out? And I know you're busy, and I'll wind this up, but I really want to know what stood out about a guy like John Hughes.
Well, it was just, I mean, first place, he was funny in person. But then a lot of people are funny in person. That doesn't always translate to anything that can be sold, rented, or even displayed to the public. But the thing about John was he was just insanely prolific. John would come in with like 3 short stories finished and ideas for 6 more. And you were going like, John, I only publish this damn magazine once a month. You're either going to have to slow down or change your name.
So PJ, thanks so much for spending the time. I know
not at all. It's fun.
I know you've had an incredibly busy week, so this ends the week hopefully for you, and you can relax a little bit. But your book.
I wish I could. I got a conference call in about 15 minutes and a lot of undone stuff. But I intend to down tools at cocktail hour today and not resume anything until.
I do want to mention that your book, Thrown Under the Omnibus, is coming out October 6th. And not in November.
You looked it up. Is that when it's coming out?
Yeah, so I just wanted to inform you
of that. No one tells me.
And then I wanted to close with a quote from you, which I forget where I got this quote from, but it's from you, unless you say it isn't. But it's, everybody wants to save the earth. Nobody wants to help mom do the dishes. And
that's absolutely true. That is me. And believe me, around our house, that is so true.
But I think that's useful for every argument on internet message boards about politics. So yeah. I'm going to steal that one from you. I'm actually going to steal that joke from you.
It's all yours. I'll give it to you. Pretty simple.
Thanks so much, PJ, and I will be seeing you soon.
Okay, excellent.
Bye.
Talk to you later.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network at stansberryradio.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.